Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast, hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
Today I'm going to cover the early Greek philosopher Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras is known as Anaxagoras of Clazomenae, which is where he was born. That is part of modern-day Turkey. Then it was called Ionia, and it was an area that's pretty close to the Aegean Sea there on the west side of modern-day Turkey. At that time, it was part of Ionia, and it was controlled by the Persians. Anaxagoras lived between 500 BC and 428 BC. And although being known as Anaxagoras of Clazomenae, he didn't live there long, and he made his way over to Athens. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. I wanted to read a little snippet about his life from a work put together by Diogenes Laertius. I've been referring to this a lot. He wrote a work called The Lives of the Eminent Philosophers, and so as I'm going through these pre-Socratic philosophers, I'm also looking at their lives in this book because it's kind of an ancient source on their lives. But this guy is so funny, Diogenes Laertius, because he just like compiles all the things that he's heard and about these people, and oftentimes they don't match. So you're kind of just left wondering, well, I don't know if that's true or not, but there's some really good stuff in this work. So here's what he had to say about Anaxagoras. He was eminent for wealth and noble birth, and furthermore for magnanimity, in that he gave up his patrimony to his relations. For when they accused him of neglecting it, he replied, "Why then do you not look after it?" And at last he went into retirement and engaged in physical investigation without troubling himself about public affairs. When someone inquired, "Have you no concern your native land?" "Gently," he replied, "I am greatly concerned with my fatherland," and pointed to the sky. End quote. So that gives you just a little bit of insight into Anaxagoras. And this is something else that he said, and this also comes from the same account by Diogenes Laertius. And when he was asked why he was born, he had this to say: "To study sun and moon and heavens." End quote. So that was his purpose on earth. That's what he was about. That was all what he was all about. And we'll see some of those things pop up in some of the things that he talked about. This is really neat. He was credited with taking ideas from Ionia, from Clazomenae, and taking them to Athens, and being actually one of the first philosophers to go to Athens. And that's been interesting as I've been reading about these early Greek philosophers, these pre-Socratics, that I guess I just would have assumed that they were in and around Athens, but that's not the case. A lot of them were from Asia Minor. Some of them were from southern Italy, and not many of them were from Greece. And so here you've got one of the first philosophers moving to Athens, and then you see the results of that, and there being kind of a direct connection to Socrates and Plato. So Robin Waterfield said that he was a prominent figure in intellectual circles in Athens. So he made his way to Athens and then became a prominent figure. So he was likely in Athens from 480 to roughly 430. Again, these dates are hard to know for sure, but that gives him quite a bit of time in Athens where he had quite an impact. As for contemporaries, he was a friend of the Athenian statesman Pericles, and it is said that the tragedy writer Euripides was his pupil, or at least was influenced by Anaxagoras, which I find that to be cool, that Euripides, the tragedy playwriter, was influenced by this philosopher. Anaxagoras was also a bridge to Socrates through his pupil, who was named Archelaus, and Archelaus taught Socrates. So Anaxagoras taught Archelaus, and then Archelaus taught Socrates. So in this case, Anaxagoras is kind of the philosophical grandfather here to Socrates. And so there's a direct line, obviously, from Socrates to Plato there as well. So big impact that this man had. He was also the first to publish a book in prose. And it was said that he was to have written in ponderous and incantatory prose. The first to publish a book in prose is always kind of strange. I don't know how they would be able to prove that, but especially with these guys, we don't have their actual works. We've got fragments of them, and you never know if something was lost before that. That was a book of prose before that, but he's credited with that as being the first to publish a book in prose. At the end of his life, he was put on trial for impiety, and he was exiled. And so he died in a spot called Lampsacus, which is back in Asia Minor. And being on trial for impiety, we'll see why some of his ideas were against the gods. And so if the Athenians are still wanting to put forward the ideas of things being generated from the gods as opposed to what Anaxagoras said they were from, that could get him in trouble. There's also kind of ideas that he may have just kind of been in the wrong circles, or people who were trying to get back at Pericles may have thought, let's attack his friend Anaxagoras. So he was tried for impiety, but there may have been some other reasons and political reasons behind that trial. For his grave, there's an inscription on the grave, and it says, "Here Anaxagoras, who in his quest of truth scaled heaven itself, is laid to rest." For each of these early Greek philosophers, I'm talking about their first principle, or their main idea, the thing that is the foundation for everything else. And what's really interesting is that a lot of these philosophers had different ideas of what that was. So with Heraclitus, we saw his first principle is fire. We saw water, and for Anaxagoras, his first principle was the mind, the Greek word nous, Nous. And here's one of Anaxagoras' most famous quotes. He says, "All things were together, then thought came and arranged them." And that's the end of the quote. Just all things were together, then thought came and arranged them. And so the idea here is that there's kind of an original state of affairs. It's almost a creation story in the sense of there's this original mixture of things. He says all things were together. There's just this kind of mixture of infinitely minute quantities that contained the potential for all things. And this was just kind of a blob at rest of containing all the things necessary for life. And what happened is then thought came and arranged them. So there's this idea that this nous, this mind, it's also translated thought or intelligence, becomes an ordering principle for these things that are just in an original mixture. And it starts spinning things. So there's motion. And as things are spinning, they're moving and they're separating and they're organizing. And so his first principle was this nous idea of a mind or thought putting things in, setting things in motion, but them kind of moving out and becoming organized. So there's an organizing principle, there's an ordering principle at work here that starts with a set of things, and then it becomes ordered. But it's a mind. It's not necessarily personified, but it's kind of a capital M mind that is doing this. The idea is that there are seeds that are coming together. So let me read this one part here. And this is from the Oxford World's Classics book called The First Philosophers, and it's translated by Robin Waterfield. So this is what we get with these early Greek philosophers is a lot of fragments. So it's people talking about what they said, and so this is not necessarily a quote directly from Anaxagoras, but it's somebody commenting on what Anaxagoras thought. So here's what, and actually this comes in the introduction where Robin Waterfield is talking about the ideas of Anaxagoras. So here's what he says. But what is important to note is that Anaxagoras imagines all possible worlds to be identical in all respects except for size. In other words, he feels that the ingredients and factors and laws he will specify in his book guarantee only one kind of world. The seeds within the original mixture are seeds that can give rise only to certain kinds of things. Just as in modern physics, the nature of our universe is dictated by the set of laws that govern it, while a different set of laws would create a different universe. And I'll stop reading there. So there's this idea that in this kind of original mixture of things, it's seeds, and these seeds give rise to certain kinds of things. And so one way to look at this is that the seeds are kind of what Plato calls the forms. These are the things that are not changing, but these seeds can combine, and they can they're what create different things that from humans to plants, and everything is created from these seeds, but the seeds can intermingle. The only thing that can't intermingle is this nous, this mind. So the mind is separate, but he also says it can be part of it. So there's a separate aspect of it, but then a human would have a mind. So a mind can also be part of it. And let me read from that part here. This is from the Oxford World Classics book. Since there are numerically equal portions of the great and the small, it flows that everything is in everything. It is impossible for there to be isolation, but everything has a portion of everything. In everything, there is a portion of everything except of mind, and there are some things in which mind is present too. So again, that last part there. In everything, there's a portion of everything except of mind, and there are some things in which mind is present too. So that's a quote from Anaxagoras. Let me read another part as a comparison. So this part is talking about differences between Empedocles and Anaxagoras. So Empedocles, I talked about him last week. So here, and this is a statement about their beliefs. The difference between Empedocles and Anaxagoras are that, according to Empedocles, mixture and separation occur in cycles, while according to Anaxagoras, the separation was a unique event. End quote. So you get the idea that there was this initial separation. There was as it said there's this initial event that separated things out. And in one of those other quotes I read at the very beginning, the idea here is that these, since the seeds are the same, and since the almost like the laws are the same, these things are going to be the same no matter where you are, because the original mixture is the same, and so a human is going to look like a human on the other side of the world, and plants, we can tell an oak tree from a maple tree. They're all going to have their specific kind. The other ramification for this idea and this first principle is that nothing comes into being from non-being. All of that original stuff, the original seeds existed, and they were not generated. They just always have been. But nothing can come into being from non-being. That comment I read just a few minutes ago, that everything is in everything. The idea there is that everything has seeds of everything else. So within each seed, the example that's given is a human can eat wheat, and within that wheat seed, there are pieces of hair or nails or different things that we have, because everything has seeds of everything else. And so as we're eating the food, our hair grows, our nails grow. His thought on that was that everything has seeds of everything else. Everything is in everything. And so that's another kind of interesting idea as part of that. All right, let's go on to a few other things that he believed. One was that it's kind of part of this shift where things are I mentioned this last week, where things are shifting from this Homeric epic idea of the gods were in charge of everything. So if you see thunder, it's because Zeus shot out a thunderbolt. If you see other things happening, it's because of the god. But if you start to kind of talk about them more in terms like this, so Anaxagoras said this about the earth. And this may have been one of the reasons he got in trouble for impiety. Anaxagoras said that the earth is flat and stays suspended because of its size, because there is no void, and because it is carried like a vessel by the air, which is extremely strong. The sun, moon, and all the heavenly bodies are fiery stones which have been taken up by the rotation of the ether. And I'll stop reading there. So the sun, moon, and all the heavenly bodies are fiery stones. That would go against these things being gods. And so there's more of a natural description or understanding of what these things are. The sun is a glowing rock up in the sky, and he says it's larger than the Peloponnese. He comments on Homer, and I thought this was interesting, so I'm going to go back to the Loeb book here, where this is the one by Diogenes Laertius, and he says this about Homer. Homer, in his poems, treats of virtue and justice. And I'll stop reading there. So he talked a lot about that, of Homer talking about justice and virtue in these works, in the Iliad and the Odyssey. The other thing that he says, another statement that he makes, and this one's from the Penguin edition. I'm just going to read from there. He says this: wherever you start from, the descent to Hades is the same. I thought that was interesting. No matter wherever you start from, the descent to Hades is the same. Everyone ends up in Hades. Those are some of the main ideas from Anaxagoras. If I'm to pull the one thing that has really stuck out about his ideas, it is that idea of the nous and the mind, the kind of this impersonal mind that set things in order. And it made me think of the book of Genesis. It made me think of the book of the Gospel of John. Just in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And you get this impression, especially in Genesis, you get this impression that there were things there, and there was that God organized things. He separated things. So he separated day from night. And so I thought that was a neat thing to see here, that this philosopher had kind of thought of things in a manner where there were existing things and then some sort of a mind. So we're not talking logos here. We're talking the word nous, of mind, thought, or intelligence. But yeah, it was neat. That's kind of the one thing that I keep thinking about Anaxagoras here. Also very neat that he moved to Athens, and you can really trace a lot of Athens becoming a philosophical hub to him moving there, to there being a direct line from him to Socrates. That's really cool. I am going to continue just reading about these early Greek philosophers. I've been finding it really interesting and very helpful. As I've mentioned in other episodes, I started reading Plato last year and just got stuck because he kept mentioning these early Greek philosophers. I didn't know who they were, and I didn't know what they thought. And as I've just spent more time with these philosophers, I'm getting a better understanding of Plato. I look forward to going back to Plato after this. But then just to see how these ideas have expanded, how some of these early Greek philosophers were commenting on one another in one another's ideas, and really going from there. It's been a neat study so far. So I'll continue on, and I'll keep sharing what I'm learning on the podcast here about these different Greek philosophers before I go back to Plato. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening. I'd love to hear from you if you have other things that you want to share about Anaxagoras. If I got anything wrong, please do let me know. You can email me at eric@booksoftitans.com or just comment on this podcast episode in Substack. Follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter. Please check out the website as well, and make sure to sign up for updates from Substack. I do an article every Tuesday and then a podcast every Friday, so that'll keep you in the know on those things. I'll be back next week with another early Greek philosopher, and until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.